Welcome to QandA. I'm Fran Kelly, and tonight we're in Melbourne collaborating with the Wheeler Centre's Broadside Festival. On our panel, anti-ageism author Ashton Applewhite, Egyptian-American feminist Mona Eltahawy, businesswoman and social change agent Hannah Asafiri, Indigenous screenwriter and activist Nayuka Gorry, and Jess Hill, whose latest work is challenging old assumptions about male violence. Please welcome our panel.
Minorities in competition with a whole host of other issues. How we view minorities, how hostile to minorities, all minorities, including women, disabled groups, queer community, Muslims, and
are a minority of the population. Ageism, I should say, is any judgment on the basis of age. So young people, children, experience a lot of it too. A society that doesn't look after children is also ageist. At the margins of society, I would say capitalism is.
The shocking state of our aged care sector, and it was described as sad and shocking and cruel and harmful, was it represented an ageist mindset?
If there was adequate state support, you wouldn't feel you had to go it alone.
I think we're saying Australians, but I think if we're looking at who we're actually talking about, I think, what we're seeing is also white culture.
The white experience, the white male experience generally, but the white experience overall. Us who are not white, those of us who are not able-bodied, those of us who are not men, for white people to acknowledge this as their problem and to begin learning from us.
The covert ageism I experienced during some interviews before securing my current role was stressful, just to say the least.
On the aged care point, this issue of discrimination in the workforce is widespread for employers to judge employees not by what they look like or who they sleep with, for that matter, or where they come from, but on the basis of their individual capacity. Age discrimination is illegal. It's social movement, like the women's movement, ageism at its broadest level, which is between our own ears.
I think it's also important to look at the gendered nature of aged
Absolutely.
care and when it's a cycle of disadvantage for women. Women's work is not recognised.
Racism was the cause of our mum's death. To acknowledge racism, and how should people be held to account?
We hire more black people? Should we have more women? White sovereignty in this country is patriarchal, and it is overwhelmingly white.
To black deaths in custody. One of the key things they found was that public drunkenness should no longer be a criminal offence. To formally consider systemic racism.
But also being a black fella.
Acknowledge racism and do something about it. How do we hold people to account?
Well, they fuck the patriarchy. So I think that what we have to do is start seriously talking about dismantling patriarchy. And when I talk about patriarchy, I'm talking about a white supremacist, capitalist, imperialist patriarchy. So as a problem in my country of birth, Egypt, where police brutality is connected to a fascist state or a militarist state. Overwhelming power of the state. And that state is driven by a white supremacist patriarchy. Patriarchal authoritarians, if you're a woman, if you're queer, if you're of colour, if you're disabled, etc., etc. Say patriarchy is like an octopus, is misogyny, would be capitalism, it would be police brutality, it would be homophobia, privileged male dominance, systems of oppression of the patriarchy. We have to dismantle patriarchy because it's the year 2019.
About patriarchy, but if we're talking about a settler colonial state like Australia, we need to question where that patriarchy comes from, and colonialism is
white supremacy.
It's not just racism and white supremacy, it's a cultural issue, it is a systemic issue, and racism absolutely played a role in that.
And entrenched racism is unquestionable. How do we get them to acknowledge racism? Institute domestic violence. Police, address a domestic violence incident in this country once every 2 minutes. How do we get them to acknowledge and to change? And is smash the patriarchy the only answer?
There's that. There is smashing the patriarchy. There's a history of colonisation and what's happened particularly in Australia. And what we did is we came here, we raped and abducted their women and girls. The system of patriarchy and racism. We then, when we raped and abducted their girls, when they had white babies, we abducted them. We imported the violence. There may have been violence in Indigenous cultures before we got here, but they live by a very strict moral code. And Australia has a very hard, long history of violence against Aboriginal women and girls and Aboriginal boys.
You're saying you don't want any police at all, but if we're going to have police, don't we want them to be reformed?
I think what's missing from this whole conversation is truth-telling. Indigenous and First Nation issues are not sexy and there's no currency politically to take them on in a real and meaningful way. Recognition, reconciliation, what's like Uluru closure. We need to stop the doublespeak. This doublespeak about, on the one hand, we claim, yet those claims are hollow.
Politically woke need to get over themselves.
So remember, if you hear any doubtful claims on Q&A, let us know on Twitter, and keep an eye on the RMIT ABC Fact Check, the Conversation website for the results.
For many women and gender diverse people of colour, already marginalised voices, and what would you say in response? Safe spaces to actually speak out about injustices within our community and more broadly.
Tell people to fuck off. Those words were invented by white men for the benefit of other white men, for white men. Said people of colour and gender diverse people. We go high, no I fucking don't. If you go low, I'm gonna come for you. Luxury or the privilege to sit there and be civil with people who do not acknowledge my full humanity. Of young black feminists in the United States, indigenous feminists in the United States and Canada, right? I have an entire chapter on the political importance of profanity. Mother of the dictator of her country had poisoned him, that her birth canal had poisoned him during birth. And when, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you.
I just want to take the opportunity and talk about climate change.
Consumers in a capitalist society is threatening is frankly ridiculous.
And we have this fascist fuck talking about white supremacist capitalists, etc., etc. The fascist president of my country of birth is doing. And apartheid in South Africa.
Virtue signalling.
Seeing these patriarchal authoritarians, as I've said, feminism is the best kind of resistance to that patriarchal authoritarianism that was rising up against patriarchy, sectarianism, and authoritarianism and corruption. Old white men, mostly, the pockets of capitalist giants like coal.
Not their age, it's not their race, it's their privilege.
Well, I think that a lot of them, it is the old men.
They are indeed old men, and many are white, but that is because of the privilege that they have enjoyed their whole lives, that they are trying damn hard to hold on to, that is being threatened,
but
as
also
it never
underneath
has
the
been.
privilege, isn't there also a disruption going on, and that's affecting not just the, as you would say, the old white men in power.
Old white men, like, yeah, you know, sure, absolutely. But when we, like, white women voted for Trump.
When is aggression and violence a better option than assertiveness, strong arguments and modelling the behaviour you expect of others?
I want patriarchy to fear feminism. Crumbs from patriarchy because they allow their whiteness to trump their gender. Even those white women have to recognise that nothing protects them from patriarchy. The most important thing is to destroy patriarchy. How many rapists must we kill? Not the state, because I disagree with the death penalty, and I want to get rid of incarceration, and I'm with you on the police. So I want women themselves. As a woman, I'm asking, how many rapists must we kill until men stop raping us?
So, Mona, then...
by men, especially privileged men, there's a hierarchy of safety too. Obviously, people of colour, disabled people, etc.
Murray, what...
They used violence. They thought what they were fighting was a civil war between the sexes. They smashed windows.
But, you know, slave rebellions.
Like, we live in a colonial state. Tipping point in Australia is going to be when people are going to start burning stuff. I look forward to it. Appealing to your oppressor.
For me, that men constantly ask, oh, you don't want to become like us.
You know, in a colony, we live in a colony. Like, I cannot, we've tried for 230 plus years to appeal to the colonisers' morality, which just doesn't seem to exist. So I think violence, I think violence is okay. Because, like, if someone's trying to kill you, you know, there's no amount of, oh, but I'm really clever, you know, I'm really articulate. No amount of that is going to save you. So
It's a tricky
let's burn stuff.
I think that's
criminalised domestic abuse.
a crime of femicide, which carries harsher penalties than homicide.
That's the issues of violence towards women, and I find it problematic and disconcerting. Gender equity conversation hasn't worked, and again I go back to this doublespeak, and you're absolutely right. Is the doublespeak. It's the attitude that gives legitimacy
100%.
to the treatment of women.
Because if you're a person of colour and you call the police in a domestic violence case, more harmful for a woman of colour in many communities, especially black women, to call the police. Psychiatrist Judith Herman, who said the legal system was designed to protect men from the superior power of the state and be white people. So it's not working for us as people of colour.
To extremely violent institutions, extremely violent, because they are our brothers. They are our not black. Your brothers. They are
System better protective of women, and because the family violence, the family court is riddled with violence.
more. It's a patriarchal institution. It's not going to. It doesn't do much. But
victims of violence, and a third of disabled women will be victims of domestic and family violence. How can we increase awareness of disability-gendered violence when we don't get invited to the discussions?
When you bravely left your partner, if I may say, that would enable you to stay separate from the man who had viciously abused you for years. Silos together and collaborate.
Other women with disabilities from different demographics, different backgrounds, different diversities in these spaces as well, and in more mainstream spaces. So we don't tend to get included in the conversation, or if we do, it's only because it's a disability special. I've got things to say. Violence and the rates are horrific, and this happens to Indigenous disabled women as well as LGBTI disabled women. In the family violence sector, and people are really uncomfortable because I've got a disability. So I get sidelined in both arenas.
It's like you don't fit.
I don't fit in either. I make both sectors uncomfortable.
I think about this with Indigenous women, but I imagine it's the same in the disability community, facing ableism or facing like racism or whatever. It just
once you find the services.
It's just another layer, like another thing that makes it harder to leave.
Overlap with, we're talking about these different forms of oppression. I do think the sort of zooming way out answer is to address all these oppressions at once. The fear and ignorance that underlies any form of it, you together.
It's so hard, isn't it, though, because you get trapped in your own ism, and there's a hierarchy of isms then, and anyway. And
toxic masculinity and its impacts on society. Aren't the constraints of femininity and masculinity toxic in themselves? And what does positive masculinity look like?
Male violence against women, whether it's disabled women or women in domestic abuse of all forms of abilities, and about imaginary violence against men, everyone's like, oh my God, Mona wants us to kill men. The gender binary is long overdue, let's get rid of it, fuck the gender binary, yes. But...
So what would positive masculinity look like?
I have no fucking idea.
Okay. Positive masculinity is an empowered woman.
Like that. Positive masculinity does exist amongst men. I don't want to live in a world where it's like, well, all men are crap, so whatever. And I think it's kind of reductionist to... There's something, sorry, full disclosure, I'm pregnant with twins and my brain is absolutely fried.
No, but the point is you're pregnant with twins and I don't know what they are, but they might be boys, therefore you've got to be thinking about positive masculinity.
I seriously have been thinking about this.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I was scared. I was like, what if I raise a cis straight man? This masculinity and femininity, like for me, they're things to be played with, that we can have fun with them, that they can be traps for a lot of people. I think particularly white kind of patriarchy and white patriarchal values traps people, and I kind of feel sorry for dudes.
I think that positive masculinity looks like positive humanity.
Patriarchy, but can we flip that around and think about what positive feminist advice you've received from your elders?
Okay, very quickly, let's go down the table. Ashton.
Well, I will say that I don't think all older people are wise. I think lots of children are wise. Really the ugly heart of ageism. To work on all these causes at all ages and make those efforts intersectional and intergenerational, and that way we'll pass on everything we all know.
The older I get, the queerer I am. And my partner is a bisexual man. And I'm urging the cis straight men out there, there is something deeply broken in you and in the way that you move through the world. As you get older, learn from people like us so that this can be a better world. Be queerer. Be more bisexual. Be less cisgendered in the way that you move through the world. Just fuck it all up and be free.
Aged care, we only have a single model that is born out of Anglo-Celtic ways of thinking about treating the elderly who are no longer useful in society.
And she campaigned for the rights of riders. And I used to sit at her dining room table and fold leaflets campaigning for the freedom of Ken Saro-Wiwa, a Nigerian activist, and many others.
So long and farewell. Thank you.
demoralization now reaches such areas where previously not even Comrade Andropov and all his experts would even dream of such a tremendous success.